Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. So, I'm your host, Rob Hernandez, with your co host, Joshua Sean, and our guest today is electronic engineer, paranormal investigator, Robert Veach.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, we lost Josh for a minute. And he's back.
There we go. Happy Wednesday, everyone.
Josh, turn up your mic a little bit.
Up a little bit more.
Yeah, you're still a little quiet.
You got it. Give me 1 second. How's that?
Good.
Okay. There we go.
So, everybody, welcome to the show. Like I said, our special guest today is Robert Veach.
Hey, Robert.
Hello.
Yeah, I've known Robert for a few years now, quite a few years. He's done some phenomenal work. He builds a lot of paranormal devices. Sometimes he even gives little how-to instructions on how to build one. He'll give some schematics, things like that. So if you're good at reading schematics and putting together electronics, you should check out his channel. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So what you been up to, Robert?
Well, just keeping busy, keeping out of trouble, and I'm hoping to get back into paranormal investigations now that COVID is gotten a little better. I've been getting people contacting me and wanting to do investigations, so hopefully I'll get back into it again. That's what I'm looking forward to doing.
Yeah, I mean, I know that COVID has everybody kind of out of the investigation circuit, I should say. A lot of us have been out for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's been, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of things from you in a while. I see some of your videos that you do, like some of your, I guess, review videos and things like that, which I'm like a big, I don't know, like gadget person anyway. So,
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's not paranormal or whatever, I still watch a lot of reviews on different things because I'm always doing different projects also. So, no, I mean, like the last review you did with some full spectrum lights, LED lights, grow lights, was really cool. Really cool.
What's funny is sometimes I will, if you look back on my channel, I will take devices that have nothing to do with paranormal and I will modify them, even grow lights or full spectrum lights, and modify them with reflector shields and things, and turn them into something paranormal. And regular cameras, I just take them apart and I get rid of the filters on there to make them full spectrum. And so it starts off as a regular gadget, and then by the time I get through it, it becomes paranormal, hopefully.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what I would do. I mean, even as a kid, I would take things apart, learn how things worked, and then put them back together, or even modify them to try to make them better.
Yeah, that's how you learn. You can, go through school and get degrees, and I got some degrees, but it really, what I learned is taking things apart, which I started doing really young, and breaking a lot of stuff. I used to break a lot of things accidentally. Things don't always work. But I took apart. I remember about 3 years ago, I was taking apart a camera, and it wasn't an expensive camera. It was about $90, like a GoPro type, and nobody had converted it to full spectrum yet. So I was taking it apart, and I was being so careful, and I was getting ready to remove this one little piece of glass filter on there. And I thought it was the part that does the full spectrum. And I yanked this thing off, and then the whole lens shattered. And I ruined the camera.
Oh, no.
A couple of milliseconds of the wrong thing, and it was ruined. But nobody had a video how to do it. So I was, trying to do it on my own, just based on what I knew from other cameras, But
No, exactly. But that's what we do. Sometimes, we don't. When we're trying to take apart, let's say, a radio to try to make a ghost box or something. I know Steve Holte has done this once or twice. You kind of experiment. Oh, let's see if we can hack this radio, and then you're like, oh, I cut the wrong wire, and you solder it back together. You do another wire. Oh, there it is. And so then the next one you go do, and hey, you already figured out how to do it anyway. So,
Yep. I had a friend over who was a videographer and probably the most skeptical person I know about paranormal. Always gives me a lot of grief. But he brought over a real expensive Panasonic 4K camera that he had purchased. It was like a $5,000 camera. And I'm sure you've seen these little flex cables that are in electronics. It's like a little flexible cable that is on like a Lexan or a plastic. And they're used in all kinds of electronics. And he saw a little crack in there. And he said, I think you could fix this. You can solder this for me and, put a little wire on there because, I don't want to spend $400 or $500 on fixing it. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I got all my lenses on and all the lights, and I got this little soldering iron really small, and I got this little micro wire ready. I got it all tinned, and I go to melt the contact on there. The thing just disintegrates. It goes, and I totally ruined that part of the camera. It was like on fire. So it's like, I had no idea those things were combustible.
right.
So you learn by your mistakes, and I'll never do that again. His eyes are like both our eyes are looking at this like, oh my God, I just effed up his $5,000 camera.
Yeah. It's a moment of silence and shock.
Yeah, we're both silent. I was embarrassed, and it's like, well, it's okay. I'll bring it in. It's under warranty. It's like, they're not going to cover that warranty of somebody taking a flame torch to it.
How do you explain that? Right.
Yeah, I explained that. I tried to fix it with a flame torch.
Oh, no.
I've taken ghost boxes apart, SB7s primarily, and I have some other radios. Again, we're talking about reviews. I've reviewed so many radios, and so I can take them apart. I see how they work, and just like you guys are working on, and to see what electronics is scanning, and that's what I mostly like to do with ghost boxes is try to learn how to do. And I've destroyed a couple of SB7s in the process of trying to figure out how it works,
Well, I mean, like the biggest thing, like with SB7s, is a lot of people would open them up to take out the antenna because people would think, try to take out the false positives and remove the antenna. And the SB7, the way that the screen, the LED screen is basically taped on, it's really easy to destroy that radio.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So you have to be really careful because that whole front panel is part of this. It sticks onto the screen, as a lot of people don't know, and they'll just pull it apart and break the LED screen.
Gary Gelka, the guy who invented that, along with Chris Fleming.
Right.
Mostly Gary Gelka. Chris Fleming just offered the white noise aspect of it.
Right.
We'd have a whole discussion about that. But he was generous enough to give me a couple samples of European ones that weren't being sold. And so I was able to take them apart, and I did damage a couple of them. You remove the antenna, like you said, to get false positives down. And I also have a Faraday shield that I use on some investigations. Mm-hmm. But it's like maybe you guys know. I don't know the mechanism of how it really works. And if it's really valid, I've gotten some amazing responses. You have. Your ghost boxes are very quiet. Mine are noisy. But I don't fully understand how it's working, but I think there's something going on, that's paranormal.
Really, none of us really do. And that's why yes, a lot of before people would take them apart, then remove the antenna. God, I can't even speak. They would throw them in a Faraday pouch, and that would give, it's the same thing. But to be honest, you don't even with the antenna on, even though you are getting radio stations, you can tell when we are getting communication and when you're not. So removing the antenna is kind of useless anyway. But it is what it is.
Right. If you're doing a ghost box session and you're in Chicago or you're in some other major city where there's 64 channels going, and you have the antenna fully out, you're going to get so much contamination that
Right.
even an entity figured out how to produce an FM modulation or an AM modulation, if that's what they're doing, or they're just going past the front end of the thing, we don't know. But you're just not going to be able to be functional in that environment. So lowering the antenna down or putting a Faraday shield, according to Gary Galka, is the thing to do in that situation. But imagine an entity trying to come through. Another thing people never get this concept is it's based on how close you are to the unit. So if you're communicating to some entity with your ghost box throb that you're making, and it's right on your shoulder, it's going to take a very, very small microvolts per meter signal to trigger your ghost box. So you can get away with getting something, even though the station might be 40 miles away. That 40 miles distance is the square of the distance that our signal is going to drop down. So, you can get something even with signals because it could be right on your shoulder, right by the device.
That's right.
We don't know. I mean,
we don't know. But, depending on the city that you live in, like you said, but even though when you go down, let's say, into a basement, because basements more in Chicago or Illinois where you are, there's a lot of basements there. So you're in a basement, it's going to shield those radio signals anyway. We don't have basements here in California, but, because a basement, it's all cinder block. And it's basically, then the house just sits on top of it. So there's a lot of things shielding the radio signals from getting down there anyway. So it really doesn't matter.
That's funny you say that because I was just remembering I was reviewing a radio, and like an idiot, I'm in the basement reviewing it, and I'm recording with a special camera, and I'm like saying, "Oh, I'm going to test it out now." I'm getting no channels, and I'm like getting ready to tell the seller this thing's a piece of crap, and then I'm like, "You idiot! You're in the basement. You can't review a radio in your basement." So I come upstairs and it worked fine. I was ready to give him grief, and I would look really stupid. So fortunately, I caught that mistake in my brain. I had a brain glitch,
No, it's just funny how because we sometimes we just I think just lose a lot because we're on site, and we forget the simplest things. Talking about, I know that you're working on a K2 meter, and I was just going to kind of talk about that because you could be somewhere near that's going to put off a lot of RF interference. You're getting a lot of spikes, and then you're like, wait a minute, why am I getting so many spikes? And then so you chart that, so you take notes, whatever, write it down. Then later you come find out you were next to a location that was emitting a lot of RF interference, and then you're like, God, why didn't I think about that later or earlier before we started the investigation? Now you have all this contaminated readings that you just captured, and then now it's like, oh no, now we got to go back and redo the investigation.
Yep. And the frequency range of a K2 is very different than other units. I think it's like 60 or 65 hertz to 400 hertz. And then there are some units you can get that are not paranormal, but people use them, and they're much wider range. They're like 200 to 20 kilohertz. Mm-hmm. So that has a big effect. The K2 meter was smart in the sense that they did filter out some of the higher things, but it could get a lot of false positives. And you get fooled by all those false positives. You have to really do a baseline scan and make sure you're not getting fooled by something, because there's always noise out there. It's full of it, the environment.
Well, especially now, like I was talking about the last couple of shows, just because of all the Wi-Fi radio or Wi-Fi repeaters, things like that, even out in the environment now, there's so much RF interference floating around the environment, more so now than there used to be 10 years ago. Even 20 years ago, there was hardly any. So it was really hard. I mean, it wasn't impossible to get false positives, but the false positives were a lot less likely than they are now.
Yeah,
So
look at all the 2.4 gigahertz stuff out there.
yeah,
Incredible in every house. You can
yeah,
get those little apps on your phone. It'll look at the spectrum, and I have
right.
several apps for doing investigation. You look at the spectrum that's out there. Yeah, you can be fooled a lot, and it's hard enough being in the paranormal. I have this conversation with my son because he's skeptical, but he's part of the team, but people are always skeptical about evidence you get, even if you take a scientific approach and you really cover all angles. Even if you have a microphone on everybody, a digital recorder, there's always a person going to say, "Oh, somebody made that sound." You're always going to get that. So when you're dealing with that and with false positives, and you have to be as scientific as you can be in an investigation, so that you can minimize the negative feedback you're going to get from the general public when you present any evidence. Because most people are skeptical, and it's good to be skeptical, but as you know, and as Joshua knows, when you're doing this, as long as you're doing it, you start to really realize that there's something going on. It's not false. It's not your imagination. You start to get real experiences and get real data, get real EVPs, get real voices through your radio and your ghost box, and they're answering things on command. And you start to realize, or you start seeing visual things like shadow figures and things like that, which I've seen and experienced. You start to really realize that there's something going on. And there's no expert in this field. It doesn't exist because we're all still learning. And that's the point of this is we're learning. We're trying to discover what's going on because there is something going on. As you all know, there's something going on. We just have to pinpoint it and present evidence as best we can.
No, that was very, very well said. And like you just pointed out, there's a lot of tools now that we have at our disposal when we are doing a baseline, because you can see. You don't even need any really meters anymore. You can walk around with a cell phone with the RF analyzer or even a Wi-Fi analyzer and get some baseline. Say, you know what? There's a lot of real strong signals in this room or that room, whatever. You kind of map it out. And then during your investigation, it'll be like, well, during the baseline, there was a lot of spikes here. So if you're getting a lot of K2 hits, you're getting a lot of EMF hits, whatever, at least you have that baseline and say, wait a minute, that was the room that in the notes here, we had really high readings. So let's try to move it to a different room, see if we get the same results.
Right, because it could be very so much. You could vary 5 feet.
Yeah.
You can get a change that's significant in just a couple feet.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a quick story. I was on one episode of Ghost Asylum, and I brought a lot of my equipment, and there was a big challenge getting there because I hit a big pothole and destroyed my car, literally, and had to get it towed back to Illinois and go back another time with my son and with my wife then. But it's a long story. But what's fascinating is I had all this rack of equipment I brought, something called a Paralab, and you put it on your shoulders. It weighs about 25 pounds. It's all strapped into you. You look crazy. The equipment is sitting in front of you at a fixed distance away so you can't affect it or touch it. It's measuring temperature differences. K2 has a millimeter. It has a full spectrum set of cameras. And it has other devices that I developed for it, optical things. And we went into this investigation, and nothing was happening in this building at this point. And nothing was turned on yet, none of my equipment, but nothing was happening. So then I turned my equipment on before they start filming. And I'm like, there's nothing really happening here. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. I thought this was a real haunted place. And it was called the Bisman Building. And I started to feel some things. I started to see some shadowy things. And then all of a sudden, they start the investigation. And it's not the cameras that were causing this, because the cameras around the whole time, the audio techs were going, running everything. All of a sudden, as soon as they started talking and communicating, then all my equipment went bonkers. And I'm talking about all the different sensors going off. And it was so overloading that the gentleman wearing it on the show was just overloaded, and he was just saying, "Well, that's going and that's going." And when I presented all the evidence to them, because I was recording things too, and they didn't know, but I had recording all this equipment also. I had tracks and everything. They didn't want it because it was so overwhelming for the show, because they didn't want all that evidence about that. They wanted it about the shadow figures and the device I was bringing for that. But it was just, my point is that you never know what you're going to get in an environment. And your baseline's important. And here the baseline was 0. And I did the baseline, and all of a sudden, as soon as they started communicating and getting things riled up, all the equipment went crazy. It's kind of neat. So, you never know what you're going to get with these ghost boxes, with these cameras, until you get into the meat of the investigation and maybe trigger something, get some entities into what you're asking. Who knows what's causing it, but that was a classic example of that for me.
No, exactly. You're exactly right. It's just because you never know what's going to happen and what's going to cause, those spikes. So somebody was asking, so the guest that we have on today, this is Robert Veach. He is from Chicago, the Chicago area. And he's a investigator and an electronic engineer. He designs equipment, things like that. So we'll be doing, so actually we're going to dip into one of the projects that he was working on, and I have a video that we'll share with everybody. So Robert, do you want to talk about the first video that we're going to share with everybody?
Sure. It's we don't have to watch the whole thing, just part of it. Maybe you could fast forward it, but it's just K2 meters are so popular these days, and the K2 meter is actually designed by Gary Galka, and he's really well known. And the rights are now transferred over to somebody else, but they're made in the United States. And a lot of people want to know, how do you tap into that? How do you get the audio out of that? Or how do you get the sound to be made when the LEDs go? So I made a little simple video talking about how to extract the audio, because you can use it for a validator that I show later on. You can use a little sound box, a little piezo crystal, so that you hear sounds when it goes on. So that's the first video, just showing how to tap the audio into that K2 meter. And this is approved by Gary Galka too. So,
okay, hold on. Let me, I'm going to share the screen, share this tab, the audio, share that. Here, I'm going to fast forward.
Yeah, we don't need to see the intro.
Paranormal. A few months back, I showed a modification to a USB monophonic microphone to convert it to a Constantine microphone, so that when you're doing a real-time EVP, you could have that as one of your timelines on the audio, as well as your stereo microphone while you're asking questions. So I was thinking of an idea to modify a K2 meter to have a audio portion coming out of it. So I modified the K2 and put a RCA audio jack on the back of it. And I'm going to show you the circuit where the tap off this device to get that audio, and a circuit modification that I have, which is real simple, which takes the RCA and lowers the level of it so it's appropriate from a microphone level input to any audio device. And what I'm going to be using, I'm using a USB-based audio device, very small one, inexpensive, that's going to plug into my netbook. And I'm going to show you a demonstration of the 3 audio lines I'm going to have. One's going to be the stereo microphone, and one's going to be the Constantine microphone, and the third one's going to be the new K2 audio coming off this. So this is a really useful modification, because most people aren't aware that the K2 is really a amplitude modulated audio device.
So what I'm basically saying there is you could tap off of that K2 meter quite easily, and you can utilize that low signal so that you could make other devices that will benefit, like ghost box validators, or you want to send that audio into an audio program, because it's really valuable information if you're asking questions and you get a slight K2 response that doesn't really trigger the LEDs, but it's still there. You could see that on, an audio program. It doesn't mean that the LEDs are going to get triggered. That way you see a really minimal response to a question. And because there's triggers on those LEDs, they take a certain amount before they trigger. And the audio is real interesting because then you could also detect false positives. So if you put that to an amplifier and you hear a 60 hertz buzz or a microwave oven going, you're being fooled. That's another advantage to that. But the main reason was to have a ghost box validator for the SPU7, essentially.
Right. So I shared the link with everybody so you guys can watch the full video. Robert's videos, I used to geek out and watch several at a time. So they're very well done. He gets really into detail. So yeah, just if you want, we have 2 more videos we'll share, but I just thought that was really interesting. And I remember this video when you did make it. And the most incredible thing about this is you hit the nail on the head. And Josh and I have been talking about this. Line level out is so important to get the line level done right. This is what we're talking about. This is what needs to be done when you're doing a line level out, is to take that signal. Do you want to talk about it a little bit, Josh? Go ahead.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's exactly what we've been talking about lately. Line level out. We've talked about in the past how certain boxes or audio signal flows didn't have impedance matching, or the impedance was incorrect, which can actually affect the frequencies that are received or perceived by the operator. And a line level out just allows, like what we were talking about, Rob, it allows that to be matched. It allows proper gain staging to take place and a proper review of the signal that you're capturing. You can properly review. The amplitude has enough gain in it to provide good data for analysis.
Yep.
So no, for an electrical engineer to talk about and
Right.
design exactly what we were talking about, we're like, boom, bingo. This wasn't, I mean, people might think, well, you guys had this, scripted. No, this isn't scripted. So I didn't even know what he was going to talk about. He just said, hey, I got 3 links I'm going to share with you. We're going to share the screen. And I remember the video, but it's been quite a while since I've seen it. Yeah. And I totally forgot about that piece.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's something that we've been talking about recently. So, yeah, everything's lining up. It's pretty cool.
Synchronicity.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, and like the theme with our show, and it's so funny because we always talk about people nowadays look for instant gratification. A lot of people don't want to put in the work, don't want to put in the research. They just want results, like instant results, which instant results do not exist.
Right. No, they don't. I mean, you see television shows and people have this attitude that Zach Bagans goes on there with his team and they get all this evidence every time and they get these feelings happen to them and scratching and all these EVPs. It's just not the way it is. It's 16 hours of investigation. You're happy if you get something happen like an EVP. If you get something visually, you're ecstatic. And so it just doesn't work that way. You got to put the time in. And that's how paranormal is, because it's not something that's going to be happening all the time. It's, the ghost box is going to be scanning, and sometimes you think you got something. Other times you'd be fooled. It's a radio station. And, another thing about ghost box I was going to talk about, I don't want to get sidetracked, but as you're scanning these frequencies, and we're doing it digitally, we're not turning an analog capacitor probably anymore. There are finite frequencies that they're modulating on. And it's really nice because as they change frequencies, they shouldn't allow in adjacent channels. They have a certain rejection ratio and everything. So whenever I would get a ghost box response, I would always analyze it and say, how many channels was that response on there? And if I'm going 100 milliseconds, I would throw out anything that wasn't 400 milliseconds or more. because I felt that if it was a radio station, the radio station is not going to come in clearly because you're going to be changing channels. So if I get a response that says yes or no, or the door or hello, that's over multiple channels, and that gives some credence to it to me that it's a valid response. And just like your ghost boxes and you guys are building, you want to hear those responses. You want them over multiple channels. You don't want to have just one channel scan and then you get a response. You don't want to have it over 4 or 5 sequences, because that to me is what validates a lot of the ghost box responses, because it's almost like a ghost box response to me is a broad spectrum of a response. It's not fine-tuned. It's not a laser. It's a broad spectrum across the band, and it comes in that way, and you analyze it with your audio programs and you get a good feel that it's valid when you do it that way, I feel. So
No, exactly, and that's what we were talking about. Using an audio spectrum analyzer, and it was funny because this gentleman in the UK has a couple of my boxes now, and he was using an audio spectrograph. And I was like, wait a minute, Sam, what are you using? Because I've never seen this before. It was kind of cool because it had the waterfall, but then it also had the audio wave.
yeah.
And he was using an app on a phone, and he had that running through. He had that running while he was recording that as he was running the ghost box. And that was pretty I mean, that was pretty brilliant. And I was like, wow, I've never seen one on an app before.
No, I haven't either. I wonder what app he was using, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I have the app. I'll have to, and if anybody's interested, I'll share it with everybody. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to look at a response. He wrote me a message.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, I thought so. And I thought Josh would be interested also.
Yeah, I've been doing it for years. And I've actually had the app on my phone for a long time. Spectrum Analyzer.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Okay. See, I never heard it. That's what it was. That's what it is. A spectrum analyzer.
How long have you known me, man? This is literally what I do. I'm embarrassed for you right now.
Because I don't use apps on my phone. I just really don't.
Yeah, I don't either too much. But so is this a free app you're using for the frequency spectrum? Is it free, or is it something you got to pay, or is it with ads? I mean, what kind of an app is it?
It's 99 cents. It's called Spectrum Analyzer. I can actually pull it up right now if you want to give me a second. It's actually very good. It will record in real time, but in terms of storing long sessions, 5-10 minutes, it's not going to do it. It's limited to how much it can record, but it will do it in real time.
But there is another one. I think it's like $4 or $5.
There's quite a few of them. Let me see here.
And it's plotting frequencies.
Yes.
Amplitude frequencies.
Correct.
From left to right.
Correct.
So if you see the higher frequencies, it'll show the 15, 20 Ks to the right and the low ones to the left.
Correct.
Yeah, it's everything between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. It's basically, it won't go above or below that. And really, the iPhone is sampling at 48 kilohertz, so it probably couldn't go above 24 kilohertz anyway in terms of what it could capture. Oh, here it is. Spectrum Analyzer RTA. Spectrum Analyzer RTA.
That's cool.
And it's got I believe. Let me see.
I know they have it both for Android and iPhone.
Right. I'm not sure the one that Sam is referring to with you, but this one is also.
It was. Oh no, it was on the Android.
Okay. A lot of them will generate white noise, pink noise. They'll have sine wave oscillation. I mean, you can do other things and just read your environment. But this one's actually pretty good. I mean, it works pretty well. For 99 cents, it's not bad.
Joshua, is it using your microphone on your phone in real time? It's letting you see it?
Yes. It's doing it in real time. Yes. And there's obviously, there's latency in the system. I mean, it's not perfect. It's obviously running through the iPhone. So there's a given amount of latency.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that if you're on the go, or if those are the only two things you have, you could still monitor and, most importantly, learn about frequency and visually see what's coming in. I mean, that's really the most important thing, even if there's
Right.
a slight bit of latency.
One thing we know for sure is that an EVP is not going to trigger it, probably,
Oh,
because
no.
it'd be too low.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, in terms of, it's running off of the microphone's capabilities, the internal microphone. So you're stuck with whatever the microphone can do.
On your phone is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
It might not even work for some phones. It depends on your phone. You have to try it.
there is
Yeah.
an app.
The one, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, there is an app that will let you, without having a separate A to D converter or D to A, it'll let you hook up an Earthworks microphone, which has a
Yeah.
built-in converter, so you can take advantage of a microphone that can record up to 40 kilohertz, 50 kilohertz.
Oh, okay. It's an ultrasonics.
Exactly, but at the same time, most of them are stuck to your built-in microphone.
Okay, that's still useful for that price. That's a nice thing they have on your
Right.
phone.
You can learn a lot. I mean, really, you really can learn a lot from these.
Yep.
I'm sorry, the app was $14.99, but his was more real time. There was really no latency. No, because
okay.
I mean, I was watching the video because he, he did a YouTube recording on it, and as he was talking, yeah, it was real time.
That's
So
cool.
I thought it was pretty cool.
Hey, I had a question. This is a big issue. People talk about this. When you have a ghost box, what do you feel about using reverb? I know that I had a video. It's probably one of the videos I sent the link to where I talk about how horrible spring reverbs are. And I was watching some television show, and they were using a spring reverb system, and it was driving me absolutely bonkers. I go through all the trouble to clean up my signals, and then I'm going to put it through a spring reverb. Now, I know that there's a debate about this, and you have reverb on your boxes. I've seen you turn it on and off. You're not using a spring reverb, are you? Or are you? If you are, don't tell me.
I do have. Okay, so I just did a video. I do have one of my boxes does have spring reverb, but
Okay.
it is adjustable. Now the box that you were talking about has a reverb tank, and the spring reverb on it is terrible. This God, just everything with that box is done wrong. So it was just like with what you just said. We're talking about the noise to signal ratio, and Josh was talking about the impedance matching. So the impedance between the amp and the spring reverb is totally off.
Yeah.
So that's why you're always hearing the constant noise put out by the amp.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that noise is also going through that spring reverb,
Yep.
and it's causing basically a lot of noise through the amplifier. Basically, it's the noise reverberating through the spring reverb out through the speaker the whole time, and then the same time that an audio signal is being pushed through, that same reverb, noise, everything it's all coming out, and it's just a mess.
Yeah.
It's not clear, it's not clean. The audio that's coming out, it's how they say garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
That's basically.
I always say that to my son, Steven. Garbage in, garbage out. It's all he remembers that I say. He says, garbage in, garbage out.
But that's a true statement. And Josh being an audio engineer, what do you say, Josh? What's what do you say to people?
Well, a lot, but in terms of starting with a clean signal, I mean, you can't do anything better or replicate a clean signal, analog signal that's coming in. And especially with the gain staging of these ghost boxes, if we are working with stochastic resonance, and we are trying to provide frequencies to amplify a weak frequency to bring it up to audible range through proper gain staging so we can analyze it, the gain staging process, impedance matching, that's all very, very important, because we are doing our best to work with a weak signal, again, in theory, but to work with a very weak signal. So if we're going to amplify that or use stochastic resonance to bring that up in the mix or through the channel so we can analyze it, we really have to be careful with how we set up these ghost boxes, or how they're delivering sound to us, because again, we're also dealing with psychoacoustics, how we perceive that sound. And it does depend how it comes to our ears.
Let me ask you this, Rob. The ghost box that's to your right shoulder there, I've seen you show that one. The reverb sounded pretty clear on that. Is that a spring reverb or is that a digital reverb?
It is spring reverb,
No, it's
but
not bad. I mean, I didn't hear that much noise on that when you were blending it down a little bit. It was fine.
no, that's what we're talking about. Acoustically, it's all adjusted. The amp that I'm using, the impedance matches the input on that reverb, and then the output matches the same thing on the amp out as well as the speakers. So
Right.
everything is impedance matching. So if you're going to start with 8 ohms, stick with 8 ohms. If you're going to go with 4 ohms, stick with 4 ohms.
Yeah.
You can't mix and match. You can't just grab pieces off the shelf and just off a shelf and just throw everything in there, because like we said, garbage in, garbage out. Because if you have just a whole bunch of different impedance, different devices with impedance line levels going in, line levels going out, it's just going to sound like a mess, and it's not going to be clean. And when I first did the tuning for this, I sent Josh some recordings. I said, Josh, listen to this. And then he was like, this is like the clip. What did you say, Josh? I'm not going to say it.
Well, for reverb, it was the proper implementation for reverb. Instead of it being saturated 100% in the mix or completely wet, completely affecting the raw audio signal, it was the perfect implementation of mix or saturation for reverb, in my opinion.
And even when I even maxed it out to go full wet signal out. And what did you say when I did that?
Oh, I couldn't believe it was maxed out. I mean, I thought you were on a typical level of reverb I work with vocalists, maybe 4 or 5, just throwing a number out there, just right down the middle. And when I found out it was maxed out, I thought, you know what, this is clean. This is something, again, I'm not, my stance with reverb in general, but it was something I was like, I could work with this. This is something I could do.
Yeah, that's interesting because the video I was watching of yours, Rob, I was impressed with the clarity also, and I would never have guessed it was a spring reverb. Yeah. I just have, maybe I'm just biased. I built a Pi synthesizer when I was a teenager, and it's a handmade synthesizer that you build with kits. And I built 2 of them, and there was a reverb, spring reverb on there, and it used to drive me crazy. I could never get the noise down on that. So I would patch my patch to have a sound like Emerson, Lake Palmer or something, or another band. And then it'd be like, I hear like this. And then you hit the box, it goes, So I just have a bad attitude towards spring reverbs. But well, your ghost box, Rob, sounded amazing. That's a spring reverb. I'm impressed. Yeah. So again, it goes down to impedance matching. And I remember an instructor. I don't know why I just thought about this. It's bizarre. I haven't had this memory, and I can't remember. But I had an instructor in high school, and he was a science teacher. And it's one, everybody has a science teacher that they remember if you had a good one. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about impedance. And I can't remember why he was talking about impedance, but I'll never forget. He brought the class outside, and he had a long rope, and he had this metal stake in the ground. And on the top of the stake, it had a little, like a mushroom to prevent what was going to be on there from going up. And on the end of that rope, he had this ring. And we're all thinking, what is he demonstrating here? What the hell is this? And he was showing that if you have an impedance match and you send a wave down that rope, that ring will lift up and that energy will be absorbed into that rod. And then we would flip the rope, the wave would go down there and it would go bloop, and it would be absorbed as that thing went up. Then he would take that ring and he would make it rigid so it couldn't move. And guess what happened? Those waves came right back to the sender. He was showing of a wave being absorbed versus a wave being reflected. So that's right on this whole thing about impedance, I guess, I just had that memory just now since high school. And I'm 62 years old, so.
That's an excellent analogy to describe that. In fact,
Yeah.
that's one of the best I've heard, because literally you will lose frequencies, or the ITC operator will lose frequencies in that communication, which can affect what phonetically a word sounds like. Cat could sound like bat, or
Yep.
brat, hat, whatever. I mean, so it's really important that those things aren't overlooked.
Yep. Have you ever seen some of the shows where they have a reverb on a ghost box, like one of these shows where they spend the night there? It was the lady and the guy from the original Ghost Adventures. I can't remember his name, and they drive me crazy when they would bring this ghost box on there with all these LEDs, but it was so distorted, and
That's what we're talking about.
yeah. So you do the right work, like you're doing, Rob and Joshua, and you end up with something that's functional, whether it's a spring reverb or a digital reverb. You do the work, do the homework, do the impedance matching, and then it becomes a functional thing that keeps the clarity of those EVPs, of those, the Ghostbox response, because you don't want to add distortion to them. You want to try and understand the dialogue. It's already hard enough to understand it. So that's a big issue. And another thing, now I'm on a pet peeve thing. Is it pet peeve, or I can't remember the word.
Yep.
So you watch these shows, and this drives me absolutely insane. I can't even take it. You see them using a little digital recorder, one of those $3,000 units that supposedly pick up EVPs really well, the old-fashioned Panasonic or something. I think it might be
The DR60.
Yeah, right. And that thing, you can't even find the specs on that because the manufacturer's embarrassed. You can't even find the specs because it's horrible. The D to A in there is non-existent. The noise level, of course, it's going to get EVPs. And what cracks me up is when they play back this crap, and you hear the person saying, "Are you in this house? Are you the aunt of Cheryl?" And then you hear, and they go, "It said yes." No, it didn't say yes. It said, and it's like, what the hell did you hear? I didn't hear yes. I heard, and it drives me insane. Do you know I had one of those in my drawer in my kitchen that my brother Steven gave to my son Steven. It's confusing, Stevie we call him.
A lot of Stevens.
Yeah, and he gave it to him, and my son was like probably 9. And he played with this thing, and he would record, and he loved it. And it was just in the drawer for years. And one day I opened this drawer in my kitchen, and I see this DR60, whatever it is. I'm like, is that the piece of S that they're using on TV? I do a search on it. It's the one that's most valuable. And I'm like, I'm just going to throw this thing out. And then I posted it somewhere, and everybody is flooding me to buy it. And I'm like, okay, you want to buy it? I said, it's junk. So I put it on eBay and sold it to some guy in the UK for $2,200 or something crazy.
Wow.
And I'm like, and then I felt so bad for the guy that I made a special audio cable that balanced the output of this piece of poop. And I sent in the cable with the order. I said, listen, if you're going to really use this, you got to use this cable, and you got to go line in, or if you're going to go mic in, I got to give you this cable. Because you're going to have trouble with the bad audio.
Right.
And I sent it all to him in the UK, and it was like, so I got sidetracked there because we started talking about reverb and audio and balancing and impedance matching and everything.
Right.
Classic example. That's a poorly designed unit. That's horrible.
Recorder has, there's actually a lot of things going on in that recorder. The A to D to D to A is actually KELP, which is a linear predictive stochastic codebook. So essentially what it does when it takes the analog signal and converts it to digital, it stores it, or it samples it by 5 milliseconds, and it stores it in memory. And then it archives it and tries to retrieve it later. So what you're hearing later is actually from a code book, and it tries to match the code. So what you get back isn't always your voice. A lot of the times too with this KELP predictive programming is there would be a delay. So when you have the clocking issues, the transistors were noisy, sending improper power to the clocks. The clocks would come off time. It would mistrigger the VOR, and when the KELP tried to access the stochastic codebook for the sampled A to D conversion, it delayed. So you'd hear this static before a word or after a word. That was actually the whole recorder having a seizure. The whole thing would lock up. The clocks would come back online, send out whatever the kelp predictive programming was able to get, and sometimes that was just what people call the angry man, or people always hear this man screaming. That was the kelp having a stroke.
Oh God, I didn't know this. I'm glad you cleared that up, because
there's a lot more, actually. I just finished testing with it. There's a lot more behind this recorder. I can't believe how perfectly Panasonic destroyed this thing. I mean, everything that could go wrong or that they could implement improperly, they literally did. They're like, proper impedance? No. Proper power supply for the transistors? No. Proper clocking? No. It was just like, no, all the way across the board. And then they just released this recorder. It was like,
it's crazy, because Panasonic makes amazing things. I have some other recorders that are amazing,
right.
But this, and then it's being sold for such a high price. I made the mistake of writing a little article about that, and boy, did I get a lot of grief from hundreds of people. It's somewhere on Facebook where people are like, "You're an ass," and you don't know what you're talking about, and this thing's the best.
I think when people get EVP through it, it's bias, meaning it's confirmation bias. In other words, this recorder I heard is awesome. Then they get an EVP through it and go, "Oh, see, it is awesome. I got an EVP through it." Well, we know we get EVP through anything. But the real issue with the recorder that I've seen lately is people are claiming that it records infrasound. And I can't stress enough, not only through proof and measurement, but this is the last recorder I would ever list on a list of recorders from a list of 20,000 that would ever capture infrasound. Never going to happen. The microphone, to the codec, to the sample rate, to the bit rate, to the clocking, it will never capture infrasound, not even by accident. And yet we're claiming, oh, no, it captures infrasound. It's like, well, where did you hear this, and why do you believe this? Do you know what infrasound is? Because people are just repeating things.
They don't. There's a Zach Bagans has like 12 of these stupid things.
Right.
And he used to have really good digital recorders when he had Gary Yook on the show more often. And now it's like he's using that thing, and it's like, it just cracks me up. And then they take the microphone of that, and they put it up to their ear. They put it to the studio microphone of the guy recording. Like, that's a good way to transfer the audio. I went through hell to make the right cables and impedance matching for that customer, and they're just putting it to the mic saying, "What do you hear? Do you hear?" He said yes. It's like, no, he didn't say yes. He didn't say anything.
Right.
He said noise. The EVP was noise.
Right. Yeah, it's. I don't know. I think the fascination with that recorder has. I mean, unfortunately, socially, it's been accepted as a substantial piece of equipment, and I'm not saying someone should use it or not use it, but the more I look at the real world statistics of that recorder and exactly what's going on with it, some people consider it a legitimate ITC device for whatever reason, and I just look at it and go, I just can't believe Panasonic released this to the public.
Yeah, I know.
It was the first recorder to come to the public in a prosumer consumer fashion with portable A to D conversion in your pocket, but at the same time, there was no quality control. I feel like they just were halfway through it and they're just like, send it out.
Yeah. Doesn't Panasonic say slightly ahead of their time? That's what their logo was back then. So they're slightly behind their time on that one.
Right. Yeah. I don't know I don't know. And all the recorders after that didn't have the kelp predictive A to D conversion. They took that out. So the QR 100, 200, 400, and therefore didn't have that predictive programming. So I think that had a lot to do with the recorder. And
so they learned by the mistakes not to do it.
Yeah, but it's hard to believe they released that. It really is.
So let me ask you guys this. I know I diverted, but I'd like to know your opinion, both your opinion. How does a ghost box, how do you think a ghost box works if it is really getting something paranormal? And what are your theories on what is breaking through that radio, whether it's on FM or AM, and what is happening that gives us a ghost box response?
you want to start, Rob, or
No, you start.
the ongoing theory, and it's not my theory, Robert. It's things I've learned from other people who have been in the field a lot longer than I have, who through my research I've found a lot of truth to, but again, it's just a theory, is through stochastic resonance, is by scanning the EM frequencies or the radio frequency spectrum of the EM and using the radio as a form of white noise, albeit in the background, whatever decibel level you have this white noise, blue noise, pink noise, whatever the case is, that these weak signals are able to be piggybacked and amplified through the EM spectrum through stochastic resonance. So the radio is a form of not only scanning the analog information of our world, but it's also a way of also doubly providing stochastic resonance to amplify their weak signals so we can hear them.
So what's decoding that resonance? Is it the FM intermodulation, the decoding of the radio itself that's decoding that, and then passing it through the amplifier section? Then we hear, in the transducer, we hear it.
That's the conversion process is something. I mean, I have my own personal theories on, but I don't know what the going theory is in the ITC field. I do know that I believe the radio provides. I don't know if it's a conversion process, but it seems like between the thermal noise and the environmental noise, once the radio scans the EM spectrum, that it's able to amplify this such a weak signal. Well, there's no A to D process. It's all an analog process to speak of. So I don't know what the conversion process is or where that starts or begins. I don't know what the going theory of that is. I'm sure some people have a theory about that.
So what do you think, Rob? What's your opinion on it?
I'm still, with some of the things that Josh and I have been talking about and some of the things that I've been discovering is I think a lot of it is the voices or something's piggybacking off of the signal. And then it is being either coming out into the environment through the speaker. But I think a lot of it too has to do with the operator. More and more that I'm working with it, the more and more I think it's coming through the operator. Just because of with my experiments, because I can do a ghost box session all day long and not get hardly any responses. Now I can do a show on Saturday like I do. And the responses that we get on Saturday's show, I'm blown away every single week. And it's like every time we start up a session, something happens. And it's always something different. Like last Friday, was it Friday? No, Thursday. Pardon me. Last Thursday, I did a show where two investigators were on location in Gettysburg. I was doing the session from here, and then we had other people watching the live show. It felt like we were listening into a conversation, or actually, I think we stepped back into time, and we were eavesdropping on a situation that was going on, where there was a couple of soldiers, 2 or 3 soldiers in this location in Gettysburg that were trying to kidnap this girl. And there was somebody there protecting the girl. And it wasn't only myself. There was quite a few people watching. Yeah. We were all like listening in on this. And we're like, oh my God, was it just me or did this just happen? Did we just hear this happen? And everybody kind of concurred. No, it was these men came in, they were trying to get to this girl, and this gentleman was protecting the girl. It was crazy.
From an electrical engineering point of view, or from the circuitry of the ghost boxes that you're building, Rob, how could something piggyback on something unless it is a frequency modulated signal or an amplitude modulated signal? Now, it could be very weak. We can make a really small FM or AM signal and put it really close to an antenna, and it would take very, very small microvolts per meter to trigger it. So how is a person doing that like to me, it seems like an entity has learned a way to get past the front end of a radio, and then they somehow get some kind of a acoustic response. Now they can't hear, but they get a magnetic field, and it gives them feedback, and that way they know that they're getting some form of communication. But how does an entity even know how to trigger a scanning radio, or how would a person have the ability to impart a signal to a radio that's scanning? It's always blown me away. I don't question ghost boxes anymore because I have had some really valid responses that even Gary Galka analyzed and said, "Wow, that's impressive." And I had the antenna down too, and I had a shield on it. So it's like the mechanism is so mysterious when you think about it. Even EVP as a mechanism is mysterious. We don't really know. So your gut feeling is that it's something with the operator, working to piggyback the signal, and the entity is using something with the operator, and somehow they're able to get past the front end of the radio, or they're modulating in such a way, because a radio is a radio. A radio doesn't care who
Right.
the ghost is. Or
So here was the thing. Like, okay, so and this is something that Josh and I were talking about quite a bit over the past weekend. Because when we're using my particular box, and Josh has a few of my boxes, you put it in this particular mode, and Josh started doing some research on the chip that I'm using and how it works. So when you put it up to its maximum speed, it's running at 400 megahertz. And then the duty cycle becomes basically free run, basically.
Yeah, essentially the frequency in astable mode, the frequency it becomes free run. It disconnects the lock from the duty cycle, and so it operates completely free of any voltage or the duty cycle or the instructions a duty cycle is sending for on off. So it runs free, and then essentially at that point, what we gather is it's going into a pseudo random mode, and the chip is sending negative pulses, and those negative pulses are creating what's called pulse stretching.
Right.
Pulse stretching and pulse retraction. So it's affecting the pulse width of the information coming in.
Okay.
Whatever information is coming in. I don't want to claim to know, but just whatever's coming in, that's what the chip is doing. It elongates or stretches it's mark in time and mark out time of the pulse.
Let me ask you this, guys. If you had an analog radio, like a lot of people have, where it's got a tuning capacitor, and you put a stepper motor or a servo on there, and you're constantly going back and forth or going to a random motion, is that functionally significantly different than digitally doing it? Because digitally, we're doing it digitally, and we're dealing with intermodulation frequency to 400 megahertz. And analog, the old-fashioned way, we're doing it real time with capacitance changes and the local oscillator changing. Have you ever tried doing it with an old-fashioned capacitor-tuned radio and moving it quickly with a servo? I mean, is that an insane idea?
No, there have been people that have done that and sold those boxes as random scanning. So they would basically get an Arduino-based controller that would control a servo, and it would program the servo just to randomly scan back and forth on the radio.
Okay.
Yeah, so that has been done. So yeah, I mean, it has been done.
So what do you think that is an effective way to make a ghost box, or are we better off with the digital so that we can analyze it later? And like I've done, where you look at those 100 millisecond or 200 millisecond, 300 millisecond variations in the intermodulation frequency, and then you could see that it's changing channels. And then whatever is piggybacking that signal, you could see it's multiple channels. So if we had an analog system, we wouldn't be able to do that because we wouldn't be able to see those changes. It would just be a sweep.
Right.
So in some ways, it's better that we're going digital so we can analyze it, right?
Right.
It's interesting because the digital, as from my perspective as a sound engineer, analog is king. Analog is the real information of our world, of our universe. Everything comes to us analog. But we need the digital realm really for speed and efficiency in understanding what we're gathering in analog.
Yep.
So essentially, they are both so important in so many ways. I mean, analog is the real world information, but we need that digital component. Really, without it, we would be missing so much, and we wouldn't have the ability to analyze what we can in such a short amount of time.
Yep. And it's hard to validate something that's just sweeping in an analog form.
Right.
Am I wrong to say I'm validating something? I don't know. Is it a fair statement to say when we talk about channel changes and getting a ghost box response over multiple channels, is that valid to say that it's more of a real response if it's over 4 or more channel changes? Like I've gotten responses. I'll give you an example. My son was asking questions on a home investigation, and this entity that was there theoretically was real violent. It busted in the door. We saw the door, and my son is not getting anything on the ghost box, and I didn't have a validator in there yet that we talked about. And this thing is scanning, and my son's asking questions, and my son is saying, "Are you the person that kicked in the door?" And then you're hearing, "Shh, shh, 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 yes, shh, shh, shh." And it was like that. It was right after the question. And the most bizarre thing was this entity that was there, theoretically again, because I can't prove anything 100%, was playing music in this guy's head, driving him crazy. The guy was a Vietnam vet, and he was getting frustrated. This entity was following him around, and he would hear music in his head. And I said, "Can you describe the music?" He goes, "Well, I can't describe it, but it's a song that he's playing in my head, and I hear it. Nobody else hears it." So my son's smart and clever, and he's like, he says, "If you're here and you're tormenting this person, can you play us a song through this device right here?" And right after he said that, the ghost box was just going 100 milliseconds.
Mhm.
You hear, "I'm playing your song." It was as clear as a bell. And I analyzed that. You could see it was multiple channels. And then there was nothing. It was gone. It was just. So what the hell was that? It's like, and then the guy is asleep. He's in the basement asleep. He wakes up and he hears us playing this in the kitchen. And he goes, "That's the sound." He's got a real voice. Like he goes, "That's the effing sound. That's what I hear." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." So
Wow.
what is that all about? If you.
But see, that's what we don't understand. I mean, that's what we're trying to find answers for. Would we ever find out answers? I don't know. I don't, probably not, but that's what I think what keeps everybody going back to using, to try to figure out, to do more research using the ghost box, because I don't have any answers. I mean, with what I said earlier, that's just my theory. I mean, so going back to like FM radio, why people use radio is we're giving them audio to use to communicate. So, so are they using those frequencies that the radio is scanning to communicate over? We don't know. I mean, where's the audio coming from? Are they manipulating that audio? We don't know. We're still trying to find answers. And that's why the next project I'm working on is trying to work with developing some type of communication tool that doesn't use radio frequencies at all.
Right.
Right.
So that's what I'm working on. That's my next project. I've
Get
been
rid of the noise factor, right? The contamination factor.
Exactly. So, if we throw out the radio, could we still get communication? I kind of know what the answer is, because I've been experimenting with it for a little while now. I think even longer than I've been building ghost boxes, and I have gotten communication with just using, uh, I guess, low frequency audio, um, up in the 900 hertz range. So using a singing bowl, using a lot of things, and even using just a bell. It's kind of crazy how you can making those tunes or those sounds. Sometimes you'll get disembodied voices. It's really strange.
What about the concept that if you just took an FM radio or an AM radio and you just tune it to an off channel and you didn't scan at all? So we don't get communications doing that, because I've tried that. And why does it have to be scanning, and why is it that it's over multiple frequencies that you tend to get a phrase?
There has been people. There has been people that have used done that method where they just put it on a static frequency, and they have gotten some communication. There's been people using shortwave radio and getting a man, like people all in different parts of the country, and they're getting an older gentleman responding to different things. And that's called direct radio voice. So, yeah, it's crazy on how that works.
Now, your ghost boxes have some intelligence in them. It seems like where you're not getting a lot of white noise in between the channel changes. And I know that Gary Galka had some input from Chris Fleming, who's a psychic person who I've met. And what do you feel about noise being introduced between those channel changes? What do you feel? What's your opinion on that?
So we talked about white noise, and it's funny because I had a long conversation with Chris. I met him up in LA, and he asked me to come up to see him he was going to be at a convention. So he just told me, hey, come out to the convention and hang out at the booth. We'll talk between his readings, because he was doing psychic readings also that week or that weekend. So
he's got to pay the bills.
No, exactly. So I kind of just hung out at his booth. We talked in between his sessions, and we were talking about that. And he was like, when I first got a couple of beta units from Gary that didn't have any white noise, they were just scanning the radio, and they were quiet. And then he said, no, we need to implement white noise. So he talked about the whole project that he was working on with Gary. And then I said, well, isn't that kind of ironic how now people are trying to take out that white noise? And this was what, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
It was about 3 years ago in June. It was June or July. One of the, I don't remember. Because they have like this big annual, because they start announcing like all of the, haunts that are going to take place at Knott's Berry Farm, Six Flags and Universal Studios. So everybody starts announcing their haunts. They have a big convention every year in June, July. I think it's July and August. Anyway, so anyway, that's when him and I were talking about that, and I was like,
that's funny, because that's when I saw him too at a convention. I went to a free one, and he was not doing readings, but he was just talking about his life, and he knew I was coming to that. He said, "Yeah, let's meet up at that convention." And you're right, Gary Galka, who worked with him on the SB7, is now producing ways to get rid of the white noise. And It cracks me up. He's going full circle. I think we talked about that, Rob, in Joshua. Something we talked about already. It's going full circle. It's like, here's the noise. We think it's necessary. Now let's get rid of the noise, because we didn't go back to our original design to rebuild the SB7. We're just going to try and fix it afterwards, kind of like a Band-Aid. Right. I never got that concept of the noise. It's a really irritating to have the in the recording. Right. And the first time I listened to your Ghost Box, Rob, years ago, I'm like, oh God, I don't care if he's got a spring reverb or not. There's no noise in here. I'm not hearing that irritating noise.
Yeah,
and we're trying to hear minute vocal changes in there that's not radio stations. And the last thing we want is white noise in there, or pink noise, or any kind of noise. From an audio point of view, it's like, I know you do noise. I remember that Joshua was talking about adding types of noise in recordings,
Right.
and that's another whole area of conversation. But I get that. But to have white noise just thrown into the mix of a ghost box, to me, never made sense to me. It just never did. So I'm glad they're trying to get rid of it. I'm glad you don't hear it in your boxes, Rob, because to me, that defeats the purpose. It really does, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Rob?
no, I was going to play a clip on how my box started or sounded when I first started.
Oh, how many years ago?
Hold on, maybe this is it.
Oh, you found it?
Yeah, this is it. Yep. So here, I can play a clip on what my box sounded like when I first started, and you guys tell me what it sounds like. Hold on one second. It's kind of funny. You know what? I could probably just play it, and you guys would hear it. Hold on one second. You guys are gonna laugh.
I'm already laughing. I know what it sounded like.
Let's see. For some reason, it's not.
It doesn't even the computer doesn't even want to play your first design.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, I don't want to hear that, Rob. It's horrible. We buried that. I buried it deep in the file structure.
Here, you know what? I can play it on YouTube really quick. Hold on one second. I'm gonna go find my YouTube video, then I'll share it. I just want you guys to hear what it sounds like.
Are you a few seconds away from finding it?
I'm here.
Okay. Okay.
Let me share my screen really quick.
Oh, we're waiting all this time to hear a noisy circuit. I'm so excited.
I know, right?
Oh,
Hey, anything goes on the show.
Yeah.
My son was upstairs, and he's a little heavy-handed, and he slammed the door closed, and I'm seeing all the comments like, what was that? That sounded like an EVP. What was that? It's my son slamming the door.
Right.
Contamination.
Right. That's funny.
I was testing out a new circuit
Can
board.
you guys hear that?
Yeah.
And after I put it together, this was just a little demo, or it was a new circuit that I was working on. After I put it together, it sounds exactly like an SP7. Let me turn it up.
Oh, God. I'm deaf right now.
Wow. You know what? It comes down to balance. I think we learn about that in life with everything. White noise does offer the possibility of stochastic resonance to occur. It does. It has all frequencies at an equal sound intensity level. It does. But adding artificial digital white noise on top of what the radio is already producing, the radio already produces.
It has its own noise, right?
Right. Thermal noise from the circuits. It's getting electromagnetic interference from the environment. You already have enough to create stochastic resonance. So when you add all this extra digital white noise, and again, it's not even mixed properly, in my opinion. I mean, they could reduce the gain, 5-6 decibels and still have it contribute to communication. It's just so loud in the mix.
Yep. Like Rob said, I think it was you said, Rob, you said something like they went full circle, or I said that. And you said, why would they just go back to the original design and just get rid of the white noise?
Right.
And just say, get rid of the synthetic crappy noise. And there's enough natural noise there. Anybody that's got a radio hears noise,
Right.
and as you're scanning, you're going to get that. Why introduce this artifact and think that the entity is going to be able to work with that or modulate that. It's a, you know, I mean, I like Chris Fleming, but that was the direction that he made Gary Gelko steer to. I don't think it's the right one.
And we can
but
see
but the whole thing with that, with the, you know, my board sounded like, I mean, that's where it went. I mean, when I first got the circuit sweeping, that's exactly what it sounded like. So I started changing the sweep circuit a little bit, and so it went from sounding like that to where my box sounds today.
Now, did you put white noise in, Rob? Did you add noise like they do?
No.
Then where'd that noise come from?
That was from the radio. I found out that I'm using the same board that they're using right now, from the manufacturer that I ordered it from.
it's a common board. Yeah,
It's a common board. So they changed the circuit. So because all those boards are made in China, what they do is they're mass producing boards for one company. They'll produce more radios to sell on, you know, as another product, and then they'll sell those boards out to whoever wants to buy them. So, so I basically found a board that I wanted to work with. As soon as I got it sweeping, I was like, "Oh my god, this is an SB7 board," and then I just started playing around with the sweep circuit, and then all of a sudden, the way that I designed the circuit, the way that I got it working, everything just aligned, and then I got it sweeping again. I was like, "Wait a minute, this box is quiet. What was the difference?" So, I mean, there's ways that they can change it up. I'm not going to give them the idea on what to do, but it can be naturally cleaned up on its own. You don't need another circuit board to make it quiet. It naturally can do it on its own.
Okay. So do you think they actually introduced noise on purpose, or that was just the noise from the way they were implementing that integrated circuit for the radio scanning and whatever that's in there?
I think it's just the redesign of the circuit. They wanted it to have noise in there, so they retuned the radio. And basically that's all it is it's basically you're just tuning the radio to have less noise.
Yeah. So you don't think they intentionally put a noise circuit in there like we're thinking? It's just the radio itself. Okay.
It's not a dirty power supply or anything. No. I was thinking that too. Like how did they add that?
Yeah, and it's just so weird it's weird they wouldn't go back like you've done, Rob, to eliminate the noise instead of having it on the output. Well, I know why he's doing that, because he's got to sell SB7s as they are, and he wants to sell new stuff. He's got to make a living. So I get the concept. But from a research point of view, you wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. And Joshua wouldn't do that. We would start from the beginning and correct it instead of putting a Band-Aid on, you know. Crap in is crap out. So it's crap in and you're getting crap out. So it goes back to that.
It did take, it did take a lot of work for me to get it right. It didn't just happen overnight. But you know, I did try different boards. I stuck with that same radio board because I liked the way that it was working. But I did try some other implementations on the sweep circuit. And then once I got like I said, I got everything to match up just right. And then all of a sudden that noise just was gone. As soon as I put in a different sweep circuit, got everything sweeping again, I was like, wow, this is quiet.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, that was the number one thing that always darn you with ghost boxes is that noise level. So going back to the other videos there, we can switch gears if you don't mind. I just wanted to just say,
no.
I'm not giving myself a plug because I don't plug anything.
No, please.
I want you to plug whatever you have.
I'm open source, as you know. I will tell anybody how to build anything because I don't make a penny on paranormal. But one of the things that the latest thing I worked on is something called the Paraselfie. And it is a camera and a monitor and a bunch of sensors in front of the camera. And my whole goal was to get an entity to want themselves to be seen on my full spectrum camera, which has special lighting. And it's pretty cool, I think. It has all these different sensors, and the strobe rate of these LEDs that hit whatever's in front of this camera go and change and blend based on the EMF field, based on the vibration level, and there's like 12 different positions. And my whole goal was to see if you can get an entity to go in front of this so that they see themselves on a monitor, they start interacting with it, and they could see and pick the frequency. We always talk about frequencies, right? Frequencies is everything. Pick the strobe frequencies that makes them appear on this monitor that they could see with the special camera. But I haven't been able to test that because of COVID, but I've got videos about that too. So again, we're just trying to experiment with ITC things, and that was just one of my ideas. I figured if people are vain and they do selfies all the time, I made a Paraselfie. So,
Right.
So do you want to? So since he's talking about the Paraselfie, I have it pulled up on this. Do you want me to share that?
sure. Yeah, I don't want to bore people, but it goes into what it is.
All right. So let me go ahead and start it up. I'll fast forward a little bit.
Yeah, we don't need the beginning. It's so loud. Just
Okay.
again,
Rob Veach from vparanormal.com. If you're new to this channel, I'm a paranormal engineer for a Chicago-based paranormal group that's really based on science and a lot of high-tech pieces of equipment that we've designed over the years to try and capture anything that's paranormal. If you want more information about what we do, you can go to vparanormal.com. I have a link down below. About 4 months ago, I was having a conversation with Joe DeMark, and an interesting fellow. He's a paranormal engineer also, and he's working with a piece of code that is done by MIT, and it's some research code. It's called the Eulerian video magnification, and it magnifies subtle changes in video, and he's getting some really interesting results. And you can get more information about Joe on his Twitter channel, which I'll have a link for down below also. So we were having a conversation about entities and how hard it is to capture them, shadow movement, shadow figures. Joe feels that these entities are moving extremely fast, and to capture them is really difficult, and we must be, to them, we probably look like really slow moving, if anything, almost like statues to them. So I started thinking about an idea after I had talked to Joe, and I developed something I think will motivate an entity to go in front of this system and let itself be seen. And to my right is what I'm calling the Paraselfie. So how does this Paraselfie work? Well, most people are familiar with something called the strobe light. You go to a dance floor and you've got the strobe light going to enhance the environment. But a strobe light can do a little more than that. It could actually give the illusion of motion being stopped. It has to do with the way our eyes work and the way our brain interprets information from our eyes. But it also works with a camera. So if you take a strobe light and you shine it in a dark room at something that's moving, you can essentially see a stop motion of whatever that is. So I'll give you an example of water droplets. As you could see, they're given the illusion that they're being stopped. So taking that concept of something being stopped with strobing effect, I want to be able to stop an entity that's moving across the system, the camera, or that's in front of this system. So here you can see the HD monitor, and you could see the front of the Paraselfie, and you could see a series of lights that are all LED based. And the one on the left is the traditional infrared light. The one in the center is a white LEDs, and on the right is an ultraviolet light. And these red blinking lights are narrowband red LEDs. This pretty much covers the whole spectrum of light. And with using a full spectrum camera, we should be able to enhance anything that goes in front of the camera with these lights. As you can see, these lights are blinking, they're strobing, and the actual strobe rate is controlled by one of 10 positions, which are displayed right here. I could cycle through these positions manually, and as you see, when I go to the higher number, the strobe rate increases. And I go back to the first one, it goes to the slower rate. Now, right now, I'm manually controlling these. I'm stepping through one of 10, but that's not what we want. What we want is the entity or whatever is in the environment to step through those. And the way they're going to do that is there's 4 pieces of equipment, and each one of these pieces of equipment has been modified to communicate to the paraselfie. We have the familiar K2 meter, and we have a geo vibration sensor with a illuminator on there. We have a moving charge detector. And then we have a proximity detector. You'll notice that on the bottom of the paraselfie is an unusual looking opening on the table. And that's actually where a camera is. If you look right here, you can see a camera facing out. And if I go to the back of the paraselfie, you can see that there's a full spectrum camera that is shooting low and through the system. This is a large fan with 3 blades. I painted one of the blades white and the other 2 are painted black. I'm going to turn the fan on now. I'm going to turn the lights off so that just the LEDs of the paraselfie are illuminating this fan. Now I'm going to manually adjust the paraselfie to change one of 10 strobe positions to see which one could stop the blade. And there we go. So thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our website, vparanormal.com.
Thanks for playing that.
Wow. Oh, we can't hear Rob.
Yeah, we don't hear you, Rob. It seems like we play the videos, it does something.
No. I had my mic muted.
Oh, okay.
Somebody was saying that they had some, or Josh was saying that we had feedback. So I didn't know if it was coming from my monitors, but it's not. But anyway, I was going to say, I'll give you my shipping address. You can ship that over to me, and
I'll take.
we can test it out here in the studio.
Yeah, I wish I had that many. You know who else wants that? Ghost Adventures.
Oh.
And you know what's wrong with Ghost Adventures is they take and they don't give. They just want anything, and they don't even guarantee it's going to be on television or being used. They'll just take it, and they can throw it out, do what they want. Gary Yelko told me, don't send them anything.
Isn't that part of their expense list, though? Isn't that the perks of being famous? You can people send stuff in, and you're not supposed to expect to get it back. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Gary Yelko said that he sent them a $6,000 suit that has thermal sensors all over it, EMF detectors that he had handmade, and it was all custom. And he said, I want this back. And I never gave it to him back to this day. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with that, And, like Rob, you're working on a ghost box, and it's one of a kind. And maybe you're going to make a few of them for people, but you don't want to really be mass producing these things. And you're doing research. So the paraselfie is research to me. And it may not do anything. It may not work. I brought it on 2 investigations so far, and I did get one interesting thing out of that, but maybe 3 investigations. So who knows? It's like, are entities even conscious beings anymore? Are they into themselves? Do they? Because I tried to get Capone going in front of this thing, Al Capone, and I brought it to a famous haunted restaurant that was abandoned. Scared the crap out of me, the place, because it's the kind of place you walk into and you could fall into a pit because it was under construction. And I had all his pictures there, and I had these pictures of him as a gangster, and I had a selfie there, and I was remotely talking to it to leave him alone. And I was trying to piss him off, saying he's short, because you call him short, he's really mad. But I didn't get anything on there, but I did get some really good Ghostbox responses where he was pissed. And it was really, really cool. And I said, okay, so you want us to get the hell out of here? And he goes, yes. And it was real clear. And it was nothing. It was like a basement. It was like, yes. Like, okay, he scared me enough. He won.
Very obvious. Get out.
Yeah, we got out of there at that point. It was really scary. And you start getting that. And we were getting some equipment malfunctioning. And we're starting getting these popping sounds. And really bizarre investigation, because we're hearing gunshots. The EVPs. We're playing them back, and we're walking, and then we hear like, and I'm like, okay, I think it's time to be here long enough. We started.
That wasn't shot noise from cheap A to D conversion.
No, it wasn't, because I had good digital recorder, good cameras.
Right.
It was something that was not in the environment, But
right.
So we'll see how that thing works. But it's like you guys doing. I'm just doing research when I can, and I hope to get out there and do a little more and to test some of the stuff. Like I mentioned, we were off air. I've got cases and cases of electronics, and I've just got things that haven't been tested yet that I needed to go out and test.
So you see, like all the devices that Robert was building, like he modified a K2 meter, he modified a proximity sensor, he modified what else was there? There was a couple other things.
Static field detectors custom.
Yeah, right. But you know what though? What's funny is I love static field sensors out of any other device. Give me a static sensor any day, and here's why. This is why I have become a big fan of static sensors over all the years of me investigating. I don't know what it is, but there's been several occasions that I have come in contact with a shadow person being rushed, or myself and a fellow investigator being rushed by a shadow person, an entity running through from behind us through us. I was at Alcatraz. It was fun. I have a funny story. I was at Alcatraz, and we paid basically because they do have overnight investigations, but just the time of the year, I didn't want to do it because there was so many other people that were going to do that. And I said, you know what? Let's just we'll get the last boat out, because and I talked to a ranger before I went on the phone when I was getting ready to book everything. And he's the one that told me, you know what? Don't go on the overnight. Do this. This is how you do it. You book the last trip out on the last booking to go out to the island. And don't worry, you're not going to get stranded there. Even if you're there after hours, they'll finally start clearing people off, and it'll be the last boat. And it might be 1:00 in the morning. So just stay, you can stay until they finally make an announcement. The last boat is leaving. They'll make sure you're on that boat. Trust me. Yeah. So we went, and I was walking around taking pictures, and I was away from all the other tours. And the ranger walked up to me, and he walked up to me, and at that time, my ex-girlfriend, and he said, "You guys look," he said, "excuse me." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You look like a paranormal investigator." And I said, "What?" And I know your type. And I said, what do you mean? And then he said, just because of the way that you're walking and you have a backpack on, just, you have that typical, look. And he said, and the other giveaway is a recorder in your hand. And then I started laughing. And then he said, and I said, well, you want to see something kind of cool? And I said, do you guys ever get anything between this cell block? And he said, all the time. And he said, why, did you get a picture or something? And I said, actually, I did. You want to see it? And he said, so I showed it to him, and I got an apparition in between the cells. And he said, wow. He said, that's right behind such and such cell. And he said, here, I'll take you guys somewhere that we don't allow visitors up here, but I'm going to take you up on the catwalks and show you something. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, just follow me. So he took us up on the catwalk, and we walked over, and then he said, okay, here's the cell. I'm going to leave you in here for like 15, 20 minutes. I'll come back and get you. Just don't walk along the catwalk. Just stay in the cell. And we're like, okay. So we're hanging out in the cell doing EVPs, whatever. And he said, just get your recorders out, start doing whatever you want, just stay in the cell. We're like, okay. So we started doing EVP session, and then I was like, oh my God, listen to this. And I was getting this gentleman that had kind of a raspy voice. And then we asked who it was, and he said, Al. He said, Al. And then I was like, okay. So I'm like, huh, all right. And then so he came back and got us, and he said, did you get anything interesting? And I said, actually, I did. I got some guy named Al, and I put it back for him. And then he started laughing, and he said, which Al was locked up in this prison? And I said, Al Capone. And he said, do you know that you're standing in this cell? And I said, what? He said, yeah, you're right.
That's cool.
He said, that's why I didn't want to say anything. He just said, I wanted to see if you got anything, and you just validated for your standing. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
Wow.
It was really cool.
That is very cool. Hey, your friend Marcus Lindsay was at that location. I don't know if you knew that. He was on television. He had a show he was investigating there. I remember that. It was kind of neat. That's the first time I ever saw Marcus on this. He was on a television show where he was investigating there. I believe he's with, at the time, his girlfriend, too. They were on the island by themselves.
Yep.
I don't know what program that was, but I remember that. That was the first time I ever saw him. And we communicated after that. But that's a cool story. I mean, Capone, what's funny, you didn't even have to call him Shorty. Because currently you call him Shorty and it really pisses him off. That's what I've heard. Yeah. He hated that. Because I think he was like 4'9" or something, or 5 feet. But I mean, who knows? But it's like you're in a cell and you're getting some kind of response. So he's probably learned how to manipulate equipment. He's doing whatever he's learned to get impart some energy into your device. And maybe if you had a ghost box, maybe if you had one of your ghost box, the latest one you do, who knows what you would have gotten back then. I could have had the Paraselfie there. I could have maybe seen an image of, who knows? I mean, if he's that strong of a person. Oh, another thing, if you ever want to get Al Capone pissed, if you ever an investigation again in your lifetime and you want to get a response, there's another simple way you can do that. You bring a picture of his gravesite, and his tombstone is the smallest little tombstone compared to everybody else's. And that gets him extremely angry. That and being short. That's what I heard. That's what we were trying to do. And that's when we got those responses and we got out of there. It was too much, you start to sense things. But that's what I've heard, and we tried that, and it actually worked for a SB7 response that we got,
Those are
and the gunshots.
Right. Those are easy triggers.
Yeah, because he's sensitive about that, and I really believe that,
Right.
Yeah. Right. No, I think so too, and that's why I mean there's been a lot of proof that it goes. I mean, like spirit, they don't hang out in one location. I mean, everybody's like, well, I don't know how they can be here or there. It's just like, Lincoln has been seen at his gravesite. He's been seen at his house in Springfield, and he's been seen at the White House. So,
Right. Why stay in one place if you could be mobile? If you think about it,
Right.
we have a car, but you don't stay in one place for the most part, It makes sense to me. Who knows what mechanism they're using.
We,
I want to mention something. I was just thinking about something again. You mentioned shadow figures going through, and I was just talking to my son about these. And my son is a big skeptic, and my brother Stephen is a big skeptic too. So I got to deal with two skeptics. And then I have a father-in-law who is the ultimate skeptic, who's got 2 PhD degrees, and he's part of the team, and he just kind of annoys me with his skepticism. But we were investigating a senior home in town. I live in Yorkville, Illinois, and they called us in. They said, we have all this activity and everything. So we went there twice, and I got some interesting EVPs that they said out of the blue. They said, these entities, they'll whisper, they'll make fun of you. And I'm like, what do you mean they make fun of you? And she goes, well, if I'm like sitting here in the office and I say, hey, Janet, could you do me a favor? Could you make a copy of the schedule list for the seniors for June? She'll go, okay. Then I hear, make a copy. Oh, make a copy. They start, oh, for June, what about July? They make fun of you. And I'm thinking, that's kind of weird. How do you prove that? So we're recording, and my son is asking questions, and we have a lot of the equipment that you saw on that paraselfie, and you have a special microphone I developed that's a Constantine microphone that uses USB. Mm-hmm. It uses USB microphone, and all this other stuff. And my son is asking questions, and sure enough, on the digital recorder, only the one in front of him, not the one that's right next to him or the camera, you hear somebody mocking his questions. They're just mocking him in their voice. So that was really interesting because it was validation to those people. And they said, oh my God, I told you they mock us, So again, you never know what you're going to get and how that entity imparted. But the reason I started saying this story is that we came home, and this never happened before to me. I've never seen a shadow figure in my entire life. Or doing investigations, I've never ever saw that. I always thought it was just make-believe or who knows what. And how do you detect that, right?
Right.
There's forms of lightning that they just recently were able to record because they're that rare. And we come home, and I didn't say anything to my wife because I was laying in bed. And I saw what I thought was a moth flying in front of a nightlight. You know how it would make a big shadow?
Yeah.
So I'm up in the middle of the night with one of those bug vacuum cleaners hunting this moth in the bathroom. And I'm trying to be quiet. I don't want her to hear me. And I'm like, where the hell did that moth go? I can't stand bugs. So I'm like, what the hell? I can't find it. How many places could it go? It's a small bathroom. So I give up. About 2 days later, I'm watching TV, and I have a big TV, and I'm sitting there, and there's a big vaulted wall. And I see this black thing go across the wall. And I'm like, it scared the crap out of me. And I'm like, what could that possibly be? I'm the only one watching TV at 2 a.m. So I blew it off. I'm like, oh, my eyes, I'm starting to get problems with my eyes maybe, The next day, I'm in the kitchen, and a black thing goes across the counter, scares the crap out of me. And I'm like, okay, what the hell's going on there? So I just, not to get my wife freaking out because she's nervous already about this paranormal stuff, I just say, have you seen anything, anything unusual in the last couple of days? But she said, what do you mean unusual? I said, well, did you see anything that didn't make sense to you? Because I'm trying to be really careful so she doesn't get mad at me. She goes, well, I was laying in bed, and I saw this dark shadow thing with the guy looking like he had a hat, and he went right across. I thought it was you playing a game on me I said, how do I make a shadow? I said, I can make light. I can't make a black shadow. I said, okay, now I'm going to tell you what I've been experiencing. And then, of course, she got mad at me and said, what did you do? Did you bring something back? I said, I don't know. So then I set up all my equipment. I didn't get anything. But then it was gone. Never saw that ever before. And then my son, who's the skeptic, we were having a conversation tonight. He's over. He's saying about all the skepticism about everything. He said, how do you know you saw a shadow figure? I said, okay, what about the investigation at that senior center where you were the only one who jumped up out of the seat and you saw something black oval go across the floor. I said, was that fake? Or, he goes, no, I saw that. I said, there you go. And then when I was on the shoot for Ghost Asylum, that TV show, man, I saw those dark things in a dark place where the production crew is. They're in total darkness, right? And we're like muzzled to be quiet. And I'm pointing. I'm like, and nobody's think I'm going crazy. I'm trying to say, what's that over there? Very strange. That's the only time I've ever seen it in my time. I'll probably never see it again. So I saw it 4 times in my life, maybe 5 times. So I thought about that when you mentioned that, Rob, and you said a shadow going through you. Yeah. If you haven't experienced it, it's very, very bizarre.
So before I got on my Capone story, I kind of got tied up in that. So I was saying before, so the best piece of equipment that I've ever had was because that happened on a few occasions where my buddy had a millimeter that had a REM pod on it. And I had a static detector.
Yep.
My static detector started going crazy because it has an alarm on it. It has like a reading on how strong the signal is. It's going crazy. And he's like, it didn't even affect my meters. And and every single time we've seen this, and we've had an apparition walk right through, a millimeter walk right through a REM pod. But I always have a static detector right there. That static detector, anytime that there was any type of shadow figure, an apparition walking by, whatever, that static detector would just start going crazy.
Yep.
And that's why. And so I started carrying around so that just everything else in my bag kind of stayed in my bag. But anytime I was doing a walkthrough, anytime I'm walking around shooting video, I have a static detector on me. And the funny thing is whenever, people talk about walking through what it feels like spider webs during an investigation. So what I've experienced is those are pockets of static electricity that spirit, I feel, put out into the environment, or if there's one around. In the static, as soon as the static detector, I'll feel that, and then the static detector. Sometimes I'll walk through, the static detector will start going off, and then I feel that. So immediately I start doing an EVP session, and I have captured so many EVPs when that type of experience has happened. So that's why I always say I would rather carry a static detector any day over any other type of meter.
Yeah.
If I'm doing baselines, yes, I'll carry a tri-field meter. I'll carry around a frequency counter, things like that. But I never carry around a millimeter just because, or an EMF detector, just because the way I know that how they work and how they detect the environment. There's just too many false positives. So if you have something more like a tri-field and you have a frequency counter, that way you're going to know what frequencies are in that room. If there's RF frequency somewhere that's contaminating that room, things like that. So yeah, that's why I carry those.
I agree. There's a real simple way to demonstrate how a static field detector works that I've done when I've been in front of people and I've given a little presentation. You take a balloon, it could be one that has the gas that's lighter than air, and you charge that balloon on your hair, and that's what an entity is. And that balloon is floating around, and if you bring that to a static field detector, it triggers it. Now, if you move that balloon really fast, the static detector may not detect it properly, but an EMF detector is going to get a slight pulse, because a moving charge is what creates a voltage in the field of the air. So right. you can go into a K2 meter, charge that balloon, and nothing will happen. Then go fast, you'll see that display pulse. Same thing, it's a charge detector. Go fast, it may not get it, but you go slow, and it will show that charge change. So that's why it's part of the paraselfie. I feel, and that's a custom one that is pretty accurate, and I just feel important, like you're saying. I agree 100%.
Yeah. And that's why, a lot of times when that does happen, like I said, that entity or that shadow figure went through really quick, and I got, my detector was going crazy, and the millimeter didn't even get a blip. Nothing happened. So yeah, it was just totally crazy. And after that, I'm like, you know what? It's like I would rather carry this than anything else, because meters take up so much space. You can only carry so much equipment.
Yeah.
So,
Tell me about it.
so that's why I'm saying I would rather just carry something around that might detect something and kind of give us an idea. Hey, you know what? You're not alone in here. And then plus, just with me being, sensitive, I can feel things far better than any detector would.
Right. You get used to it too. You learn.
Yeah,
You learn.
yeah, exactly.
Now, if you had that audio modification of the K2 and you're going to a audio program, like I've got some little converter circuits that convert the line out of the K2 meter, that thing, the video we played, and it goes to a little USB thing that converts it to USB. If you're looking at a timeline, when you got that static change or you felt it, you might have seen something on the K2, because then it'd be more sensitive, because that triggering circuit is kind of limiting it. And that's what I've found out too. It's more sensitive than you think at that 400 hertz range. But it's just like a balloon, charged balloon moving. It should show you something. But I agree, static field detectors, they work really well. Hey, how long does this show normally go? Sorry. I just realized it's midnight.
My
neck's getting sore.
We're running a little behind, but you know what? It doesn't matter. We're having fun. We just go as long as we go. Sometimes.
Okay. I'm getting a sore neck. I'm losing my voice. I'm like, I just looked at the clock. I'm like, hey, it's midnight.
Hey,
you'd be a guest, and we're gonna take you for the next 4 hours. You're committed to this show. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh God, I'm getting like sore in the neck and losing my voice.
Yeah, no, we're having fun. No, but it's just so interesting. And you know what's funny, Robert, is I took that same that mic, that USB mic, and you had the germanium diode on it.
Yeah.
I took one of those and implemented it into one of my early ghost boxes.
Oh, that's cool.
Experimenting with, yeah. And it was thanks to you. I got the circuit. You gave me the schematic, and I built a little board and added it to like a mic. And I was using that as an input for one of my early ghost boxes.
Oh, that's cool.
I got some great results with it.
That's good that somebody, use something, because I always think that, I try and show everything, but nobody ever looks at it. It's like I'm just talking to myself. You feel that sometimes.
No, it was well explained. You talked about how it picks up, God, I forget the frequency range just before the FM frequency starts.
Yeah, I modified it so that it wouldn't get the radio signals, because the original Constantine would pick up radio signals.
Right.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those. I've got entity mics, and I've got some that are just the Constantine circuit. And Ghost Adventures has one of those too, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they never gave it back.
It's pretty interesting. So, see, at least I was a big fan of yours. I mean, I'm not going to lie. You were a big inspiration to a lot of things that I did pick up on and things that I wanted to try.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I was just thinking of something else that's right along the lines of this perfectly, and it just came across. I have another device I just forgot about, and it's called the Paratalk. And it's right along this lines exactly as ghost boxes. I just realized it. You know how we talk about ghost boxes? We scan the frequencies, whether it's analog, tuned capacitor, or whether it's digitally like you're doing, Rob. I kept saying, okay, why are we getting these responses? We're talking to these entities, we're talking to us in these radios. Why are we talking to them with our voice box? So I made a device that mimics the ghost box and takes my voice and converts it to a scanned radio spectrum. It's called Paratalk. And I got some really good responses. It's amazing. So whenever I investigate now, you'll see something around my neck, some weird looking box, and a microphone hanging. It looks like I'm doing a radio broadcast. I'm talking to the entities with the Paratalk. It's basically a ghost box that's transmitting my voice over all those frequencies, and it's scanning. And I have a choice of the frequencies and the scan rate. It was just an idea I had because of ghost boxes. And Gary Galka, of course, thinks it's a good idea, but nobody's ever produced it commercially. But there's only one of them, and it's the one I built. But that's right along these ghost box lines. We talk about frequency. This thing is mimicking what the receiving end is doing, but it's transmitting. And you have a power control. It's very low power. I figured if they're talking gibberish to us, let's talk gibberish back to them.
Right.
Let's give them what they're giving us back. This crappy little pulses of FM or AM. Give it to them. Let's see how they like it, So
within the same weak signal, right?
Yeah, right.
We need to talk some more. We need to talk offline some more.
Okay.
Here's the funny thing I just found out. Robert's in-laws live 3 miles away from me?
Yeah. Yeah. They're going to be there tomorrow too. Yeah, they're going to be in that area. Yep.
Oh, wow.
It's a small world. I know.
Not far from me either. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Really so it was a lot of fun. So if anybody wants to reach out to Robert and watch his videos, tell everybody how they can find you.
They can just go to vparanormal.com, and there's all the information there. They can also go to YouTube. There's a channel called V Paranormal 1, just with the number 1, because somebody had V Paranormal. I don't know who, but so V Paranormal 1. If you do a search of V Paranormal or Robert Veach, it'll come up. But also, when you do a search, you're going to find 10,000 video reviews too. So keep that in mind. You're going to get bombarded with those. So the paranormal's kind of in the mud now, unfortunately, because of all these damn reviews I'm doing, But again, I have a lot of equipment to experiment with.
Right.
Solar panels and grow lights.
No, I totally understand that because, I'm getting ready to start doing some other things besides paranormal stuff too. So I was going to do some video reviews, how to set up to do some broadcasts and voiceover recording, things like that. But it'll all basically kind of tie in to what we're doing now.
Right.
So it all ties in together.
Yep, it all does. Just like all frequencies are tied in all together. We always talk about that.
Right.
And psychic people like to say that too. They tune into the frequency and stuff, which kind of makes me laugh a little bit in some ways. But we all know that there is periods and things repeating in the earth. There's human things. There's frequencies all around us. As we're talking right here, our computers are blasting us with EMF. My LED lights probably blast me with EMF. My USB microphone, my monitor. There's things coming off of me, my brain coming off of you. It's like, who knows? There's a lot going on, EMF-wise and frequency-wise right now through this whole time we were talking.
Yeah. And you have to think, the paranormal wasn't the same as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Things have changed from when we were, doing it 10 years ago, just because the environments have changed. So here's the bad thing about that. None of the equipment has changed. And as radio frequencies like RF interference becomes more prevalent, same thing with, Wi-Fi frequencies, both with 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. That's interfering with, it's putting out so much more frequencies into the environment that were never there before. So this is where equipment needs to change.
Yep. It's like antibiotics. They get used to the problems that people have in their body, and then they become resistant. There's a lot of old equipment out there, and that's why we're trying to develop new stuff. So you're doing the same thing. So we're trying to advance the field.
Yeah. So, I'm just saying that to any inventor or anybody else that's trying to come up with different type of meters, you need to change things up.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yep, I agree.
But anyway, Robert, it was great having you on. And it was you were an amazing guest tonight.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time. Everything.
No problem, Joshua.
Thank you for
nice talking to you guys.
Definitely.
Have a nice night.
Josh was in awe. I just saw his face. I mean,
come on.
Yeah, I love those.
Josh is very technical also. So I know that he was just fascinated with what you were talking about. So, and I know how to read Josh. So.
Yeah. My thoughts in my head were, oh my God, I'm so dumb.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh, I can't do this.
No, nobody's an expert in this. So we're all just
I'm very impressed.
Guessing. So, well, thanks.
Yes, definitely.
So Robert can be found at vparanormal.com, right?
Yes. Or YouTube channel V Paranormal 1.
V Paranormal 1 on YouTube.
Or just search for Robert Veach, and then you can work your way. As these sellers do, somehow they find me.
Exactly. But everybody, thank you for watching. And Robert, thanks for coming on.
No problem. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
You.